The next thing she picks up is what we referred to earlier, I'm calling the second definition of disturbance in the archaic identity between subject and object. Page 7. And what I was saying earlier, she puts very precisely, the need for the dissolution of this identity arises at the moment when it becomes disturbing. That is, when the absence of projected content substantially interferes with adaptation so that the integration of the projected content into the subject is desirable. And a little bit, again, about the archaic identity. Again, I don't like the word primitives. I would say so-called primitives or pre-scientific peoples, whatever. And children have this archaic identity. And they don't distinguish between the inner and outer world. That, I think, is up for discussion. But I think what we can say, they are also able very easily to slip into a level of awareness where inner and outer are not differentiated. As she said, a child knows the doll is a doll, but it'll play with it as if it were alive. All examples of archaic identity. Those of you who've been reading around Jung might know the word participation mystique. Same word.
So, Gary, in a case of a childhood depression, you could say that possibly the child's already having trouble adapting because of whatever negative projections are on it.
I would think so.
Or it could be too much of a positive projection.
Or it could be too much of a positive projection.
So the projections are so strong in childhood that the child cannot adapt.
Yeah, and that might. This is a good way to define what ego is. We think ego means egotism or something, but ego is the ability to distinguish what's a projection. And the child feels itself to be the way it is seen. And a lot of adults do too. But what we're trying to do is help ourselves realize there's a difference between who we are and the way we are seen. But if you can't distinguish between who you are and the way you are seen, then you are living in archaic identity. Why archaic? Because you probably never were able to distinguish between yourself and the way you are seen. Adolescents, this is why adolescents are so charming and difficult at the same time. All that energy going into appearance, because they feel they are the way they are seen. And you can devastate them by seeing them in a certain way. And I don't say, well, that's your opinion. So a weak ego can't distinguish, and a strong ego can. But it's still hard. Because you're always a little confused. Now, is what that person said right or not? So that's that paragraph.
How does that work with someone, say, who's an animal woman, who then just projects on?
Yeah.
Is that go back to how her ego is not developed enough to, when she just takes that on?
I think part of it's normal, but it can go too far.
You just separate yourself out.
Yeah, like Marilyn Monroe, The thing she complained about all the time was emptiness. Well, she was empty. She was simply what the male fantasy wanted her to be. As I say, I think part of that's normal, but when it goes too far, then it goes too far.
Well, it can look like someone like her, even Nietzsche, where they're separated out from the larger group, that could give you more information. And it seemed to me that she was alone a lot.
Even when she was with, I think she was alone.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I love Arthur Miller, he would say, well, those damn people, this is what they turned her into. No, this is the projection she accepted. But it is so powerful. And, I think since we live in a patriarchy, women make a lot of money by assuming that projection. They can end up with just everything. Because it's the male who has access to capital. And if she pleases his projection, she makes out quite handsomely. It's extremely dangerous for a woman. Okay, 5 steps in the withdrawal of projections. She gives an example of a Nigerian soldier who heard a voice calling to him from a tree. A bottom of 9.
Oh.
Zooming right along.
Yeah, I had a question as to what were the I think I have 3, 4, and 5, right? But
Yeah, well, I counted 6.
you count 6?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's what I made of it. See what you think. First is identity. That is like the projected state. Then differentiation. Then moral evaluation. That goes to your question. Moral evaluation. The third
You have
one.
identity and then
Differentiation. And then moral evaluation. Then it is written off as an illusion. Then it is seen as a psychological fact or psychic existence. That's the 5th. And then I think there's one more, page 11, the 6th is the moral integration.
Gary, could you just give an example and take us through the whole process?
Yeah. So she gives the example of this soldier who got arrested because he tried to break out of the ranks since a tree told him to come to him. That's kind of far from our experience. Let's say our hero worship. Or it's a little difficult because that's kind of personal, kind of collective. Or let's say that of my Korean friends, the spirit that lives in the side of that temple. That would be the first step. Second step would be, no, Gary walked over there and nothing happened to him. Second step would be, why do we always pick one guy on the team as the hero when they're all working their butts off? You begin to doubt the projected state. The more evaluation would be, well, heroes are good things. Or with my Korean friends, are they malevolent or benevolent spirits? Let's say they're malevolent spirits, just for the sake of argument. Now, the fourth one, I think, applies more correctly to the spirits in the temple, but I'll try to stretch it to the hero. The written off as an illusion would say, there's no spirits. You're indulging in childish thinking. With our hero example, this idea of heroes is stupid. All the guys are working hard. Get that hero stuff out of your head. With me so far? Now, the fifth stage is saying there are heroes, and they're in each of us. So I am projecting my hero onto a sports figure. With our Korean friends, it would be, well, I am capable of doing destructive deeds, assuming it's a negative spirit. Or if it's a positive spirit, I am capable of doing more positive things than I realize. And then the sixth would be, what is my hero asking me to do now? Or with the if we sang a negative spirit in the temple, how do I need to be careful of my negativity? What is my negativity, and can I find a good use for it? See, it's moral evaluation. Taking the thing, wrestling with it, and finding its positive value.
Thinking of the movie Passage to India.
Yeah, go ahead.
That story, how she projects her sensuality.
Right.
And is so fearful of it.
And it goes crazy, doesn't
And
she?
it goes crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. See, she couldn't say, or maybe she could. What would she be on that? She might have differentiated, huh?
She's still unwilling to separate from it. I think.
She might still be identified.
Mm-hmm.
And
Or unwilling to look at it.
You can see what a threat this is to the weak ego. I'm thinking of von Franz wrote that paper on the berserker. Do you know about the berserker? The German myth of war was that in battle, the warriors would get possessed by a divine rage. And in that rage, they were called berserkers. It's really the origin of our word berserk. And berserker means bear shirt. So they thought that a bear would come down and put a shirt on it, put a bear's coat on them, and then they go off, in this frenzy, war frenzy. And the way she worked with that, and you think, what could be positive about that? And she said, you find that kind of psychology in people with poor boundaries. So that rage, which could be projected, let's say, an ideal of a rageful warrior, if it's integrated and if that projection is withdrawn and you then try to wrestle with it morally, would be the strength to begin to be clear about yes and no. So that's why this moral bit is so important. Often what's projected is awful, and you simply just can't go living it out. I mean, you can if you're a gangster, but if you want to be true to your conscience, you have to find a positive way to express it. And if it's a positive projection, you've got to get the lead out of your butt and do something positive in life, rather than admire positive people. be a hero yourself.
It's funny that moral evaluation comes before illusion or reading it off. It seems like, I don't know, it seems like the illusion, or if you get to that stage, if the illusion or the right, it's written off,
Yeah.
that's kind of your end point. You give up.
That's the end point for many people.
But if moral evaluation, if that's done before, I don't know what it seems like. If you would find them,
You wouldn't include.
yeah, you wouldn't. I don't know. That's just kind of like.
It's like there are two moral evaluations. One at that stage, and then the final one where you say, well, what task is this evaluating?
And you can default to it at any point.
Yeah, but if you found something good in it, why would you just?
Because it means you have to work to be a positive person yourself.
Yeah. You know how Jung talks about in marriage as a psychological relationship, the container and the contained. Projection plays a huge role in that, and you know the thing is to be able to contain your own content, right? So to me, at the end here, it's that you have managed to contain your own content
and serve them.
And serve them.
That's the kicker. Either way, serve them. In other words, projection isn't withdrawn until you're able to serve them.
Now, I don't know how that works with the second type of projection we're talking about, but in the first definition,
yeah,
when it's
I think it's
something
the same.
that's never been within you, you still must contain it within yourself.
Well,
When you come in contact with it.
we'll look at this again, but let's just mention briefly, for the sake of discussion, the difference between integrating it into the ego and integrating it into the self. Integrating it into the ego would be to say, if I'm projecting the hero, I need to be stronger. I need to be more reliable. I need to take chances. See that? Then it becomes an ego function. I do. If you integrate it into the self, it would be the voice that is continually giving you new ideas. You don't make up the ideas, but you find the ideas in yourself. You find the values and the challenges within yourself. So I think the more the content is collected, let's say our Nigerian guy with the spirits in the tree, the more you integrate it into yourself. Your ego cannot come up with these ideas. You are dependent on inspirations. Those inspirations are what that spirit would be if you find it in yourself.
Could you say that last part about the integration into the self? You said
Yeah, it becomes a point of inspiration, a constant point of inspiration. It becomes like another intelligence. Your ideas, your values are given to you creatively from within. You're not looking outside for what's inspiring. You become a source of inspiration by listening to the inspiring voices within yourself. But you can't just sit down and come up with them. You have to establish a relationship with these dream figures that have a kind of come and go as they will aspect to it.
So if we take this back to Nietzsche and how he was overtaken by ProjRec, who was meant to be integrated into the self.
Absolutely.
As inspiration.
Yeah.
But because his ego was not as developed, he could not differentiate himself between the two.
And he could, remember how Jung was constantly then saying, okay, this we accept, this we don't. This we accept, this we don't. That's an ego doing what Nietzsche should have done to those inner contents.
But couldn't we also say that the intuitive can find that self in outer objects through the magical qualities of an object, and also still at the same time be conscious that that is the self?
Yes.
So that complicates it.
That complicates
for the
things.
intuitive.
Yeah. Because that spirit could appear in a synchronicity. But I think the difference would be in your attitude towards it, where people don't look at, what's the guy's name, Hayward, on the basketball team, and say, now, how should I improve myself? What is given to me to do? They idealize it, end of story. But if you have, and I think you could probably do the same thing with the synchronicity. Oh, wow, instead of saying, okay, what's that asking of me? And as you start asking what it's asking of me, I think you'll find you idealize less. And you become the person that you've idealized.
Back to the question that Eileen raised about the third thing, moral
Evaluation, yeah.
So, say back with your George Bush example, he had differentiated that a voice outside of himself was telling him to invade Iraq, but he never got to the moral evaluation of, is this a godly voice or is this a devil voice? So that would be the third stage. You're still projecting it, but you haven't integrated it. That's why written off as an illusion would come after that. Would that be?
I think that's the idea. Somewhere you've got to say, this is okay, this is not okay.
I just got confused because differentiation would mean, to me, separating it out. And that's the second.
Well, it could be separating it out, but I think the reason they put the third stage is you can separate something out, but you don't have an emotional response to it.
So in that example, identity would have been, I am God. Differentiation is, there is a God. Moral evaluation is, was this God or the devil telling me to invade Iraq? Written off as illusion would have been, there isn't anybody telling me anything.
Right. There's no God.
Yeah.
That's existentialism, you see.
That's as far as Nietzsche got right. God is dead. Or he never differentiated.
Probably he said God is dead, but he sure acted like there was a God. That's the problem with a guy like him. But what he didn't do was separate himself out from Sartre. And then critique.
See it as a psychic existence.
As a psychic existence and to critique it. You see how important this critiquing bit is here? That you can assess it with respect to your value system. Making sense so far? Not sure.
Well, it does show how complex. I mean, you can look at every interaction in so many ways that you can make yourself crazy and unable to move. But then that would be wrong too. And yet, if you don't think at all about it.
Well, if you can get through life without thinking about it, I would recommend it.
Clearly, it's too late for that. Clearly, it's the case.
I don't know that much about the Villa of Mystery.
Yeah.
But the fact that that's on the front cover.
Yeah.
What would you were saying going to say? This is your theme.
No, this is your. You try it. Why is this on the cover?
Well, because the mask is reflected into the jar of full of wine, or whatever you call it. And this
seen by the
Is he the initiate? Or?
That's fine. I don't. Do we know who that boy is? I don't think we do know. Do we? But it's Dionysus in the back, right?
right. Oh, the mask is Dionysus. This is Dionysus is the half god.
Was he a teacher then?
No, well, actually he was. He taught him how to fly grapes and all that sort of thing. And drink.
That's Selena. That's
The Dionysian mask. Yeah.
a Dionysian. Okay.
And the mask there is in front of that dark area, so that's what's coming out of the unconscious.
That is one of the few times that this doesn't make any sense, because he's still working through those
And then
columns, if you will.
those, is that an initiate or?
No. This is all about women.
Okay.
And so why are these two okay?
Well, what I think I remember is he's looking at wine. There's wine in there. And the wine is reflecting the mask. He's seeing the mask reflected in the wine. But behind the mask is nothing. So it's expressing this paradox of the juxtaposition of wine, which is spirit. Dionysus, which is ecstasy. And emptiness, which are all three the same thing. And I think the way David interpreted that was that these boys are her animus. So her mind is getting accustomed to this nexus, Dionysus, emptiness, wine.
Okay, Daddy, I'm sorry.
The boys would be her animus.
Okay.
Because it's the story of a girl's initiation. And the scenes that preceded this.
Right.
And so at this scene, it switches not to her, but to the boys, because it's talking about the development of her mind. And
recognizing that spirit, ecstasy, and emptiness are the same? Or equivalent?
Equivalent, probably a better way to put it. And what's it have to do with withdrawing projections? I think, as we said, when you withdraw a projection, you get depressed. So that's the emptiness. When you withdraw a projection, you ultimately end up with more enthusiasm for life. That's Dionysus. In fact, the word enthusiasm comes from theos, the God in the God, and that God is Dionysus. And as you work on your projections, you realize there's a spirit that runs through them. That's the wine. That's my attempt.
And that spirit, if you also look at wine as, part of the development of culture, that spirit is leading you out into the world to be a part of your time and place and to address issues in your time period.
Yeah, those of you who heard Darryl on Saturday, I think that's what he was driving at, to allow yourself to go with what interests you, even if it's wrong. Certainly if it's passionate, because what is leading you is a projection. And certain people might say, well, it's projection, don't do it. You would say, no, it's a projection, do it. Because the projections are leading you somewhere.
Since you talk about them as a bridge.
As a bridge to reality, absolutely. And if you kill every impulse you have by psychological knowledge, you're killing yourself. We need these projections. I think that's one of her purposes in writing it. But just know how to work with it. Go with the experience that you're drawn to, but think of the 5 steps.
But you have to go through them. You can't just, can you just psychologically pull back and say, okay, I'm identical with this projection.
No, you
it happens. You experience that. But you can pull back, after it or during it and think about it a little bit, but you get caught in it.
Probably you're not going to think about it for a while.
Yeah.
You're having fun. But then a time will come, if it's based on a projection, that you'll have to think about it.
It might be the 3 figures. The one is looking away. The first one, the bottom one, the old man looking away, the one who tries to stay away from the wine. That's what.
So I think he is the wine. He's looking at it. What we don't know is there's a wall comes up here and goes like this, and the initiate is on the wall. So the way I think the person we read talks about it, he's looking at her, suggesting not that he's fleeing from the experience, but that he's seeing how this is part of her journey. I get more into looking away in that boy upper right.
But the three ways you can deal with it is looking away, looking into it to try and figure it out, and just going into it full force and not thinking about it.
But isn't this also like, to me it looks like it's a prank. The guy who's holding up the mask is trying to scare his friend. Isn't it? I mean,
No, it's no prank.
No? But I mean, it's like, he knows it's a mask, he's holding up the mask, and the guy looking in the wine seeing it is freaked out.
But see, for Dionysus, the mask is the emptiness, is the God.
And there's also the idea that you should never really look at the face of God directly. Isn't that interesting, this discussion?
Is it?
And so that's why this other boy is not looking. And you can look at it as in reflection, but not directly. And that's why they're not looking at the mask, but only seeing it in reflection. I think that's what she talked about.
I would defer to her. But see, we think of Dionysus as the party boy, but he's also emptiness. That's what is so difficult about it.
Actually, everything.
I guess he's everything.
Well, if you think about these 5, 6 steps in the Red Book and what Young went through, the depression, the hell,
right,
the going against and differentiating yourself from the collective values that would have put him in the professorship
right,
at the ETH instead of him saying no, I'm going to go with the relationship. And that's still a mystery. I guess he was going through his own initiation. I mean, just in a sense, he was looking at the emptiness, but also seeing it as the next
absolutely
passion and direction in his life.
Now, all that heaviness that we felt in that book is the emptiness of Dionysus.
So, I'm just trying to get this. So, if you go with your passion, you go with it, and experience it, then eventually you find that it's empty. Is that what you're saying?
No, but close. I think sooner or later, even if it's the real thing, or if it's, a real thing, a relationship that will last forever, or it's an experience, you're going to end up withdrawing a projection. And that is empty.
Okay.
That leads to emptiness. Of course, we don't want to do that. That's why we live in a society that projects like crazy. Because withdrawing projections means just a big fancy word for saying giving up expectations.
That's an emptiness for the ego, right? And
Yeah.
when the projection withdraws itself, then and you go through these other steps of working with it, that energy that was in the projection goes back inside of you.
Right.
And you don't stay in the emptiness, hopefully, forever, unless you fall into despair, because
Right.
it is a bridge
Right.
to something more, which leads to the spirit coming in and re-enlivening your life then through the wine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a death before a rebirth.
I feel like I need somebody to write it in plain English.
Oh,
I'm trying to get it, but it's fuzzy, so that's like I'd like somebody to say, and then I would know.
Well, it's hard because it's intentionally fuzzy. That's the difficulty. Because logically, what we're saying is impossible. But emotionally, it's reality. That if you really begin to reflect on yourself and examine your expectations, you'll have to give some of them up, and that's depressing. But in doing that, you are developing your own strengths. And as you successfully do this, you realize these darn projections are leading me somewhere. I admired this person for that. Okay, I worked on that. I admired this person for that. I work on that. And they build on each other. And so that's the spirit, that there's this forward movement in what looks like admirations.
Okay, that helps.
Yeah.
And at any point where you concretized and thought you understood everything, you'd be stuck in protection.
Yeah, and I don't think and whether you concretize or not isn't the point. The point is whether you're asking the right questions. Most of the time, people, when they come in to do inner work, they have already hit that point of disturbance. Either the positives got them into trouble, or the negatives got them into trouble. Or they want to take steps so it doesn't get them into trouble.
sometimes it has to get them into trouble, and sometimes not. Like you could have the wine experience, or what's the other one? Wine and blood. Sometimes it has to be blood. And
Yeah.
like for Jung, what he's going through in Red Book, that's a body blood experience he's having. But he did that work so that later on, you could maybe do it most likely.
Mm-hmm. Well, what we're doing today is laying out ideas we're going to be working with the whole time. So if it sounds fuzzy, don't worry. We'll keep coming back to this again and again from different angles. Also, do stop us if you're unclear. So at least you got some idea what we're doing.
Well, and you're talking about the hero. It seems like giving an example of the hero, this also ties into the levels, the stages of the ornament. It seems to me like I could describe my life as going through those, and then the energy goes to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's shitty getting sometimes.
Mm-hmm. That's the emptiness.
Yeah, that when you go through those, I can't never think of them right off the bat, but
physical, the word, the physical deed, word, meaning.
That's fairly typical in think of what
Yeah.
a woman.
Yeah, look at 20-year-olds. They're out with a guy with a hot button. At 50, you're thinking, right? Got me about 10 guys hot flash, and they're all assholes. I think I'll shoot for something else.
Very young couple.
But you see how the projection has itself unfolded. That's we're really getting something down the road. That's how Jung felt these projections aren't just messes, they're actually guides. If you give yourself fully to the experience and there's a projection in it, you'll outgrow it. And you'll develop another fascination of a higher nature. If you work with yourself. Some people never get past it.
Some people go backwards and forwards.
And there's some...
I know. Just saying.
It's...
I love that quote you gave us from Voltaire. And that his deathbed, the priest asked him, are you sorry for your sins? He said, oh, yeah, especially the ones I didn't commit.
Yeah, that's the idea. Let's see, where are we? Well, this might be a place to stop because the next bit is a fairy tale, which we'll have to read and then get into. But just one with the last paragraph, transitioning into the fairy tale. The last paragraph on page 11, before the quote. Just so you don't feel completely at sea. What is known as integration in modern psychology is thus a remarkable and complicated process. A complicated process. In which a hitherto unconscious psychic content is brought repeatedly into the view of the conscious ego and recognized as belonging to its own personality. In the process, this content is changed in its functioning and effects. That's if you wrestle with it. And then we'll talk about a fairy tale. But I mentioned how complicated it is, so don't feel that this is easy. It is terribly complicated. Practically, how do you do it? What does it tell us about the definition of reality? What does it tell us about spirituality? Is spirituality all a projection? Are there such things as spirits? And that's just the beginning of the questions that she'll be raising. But what I think is so interesting is she takes a concept of Jung's and she applies it to so many areas and then examines all its implications. So that if we're going to try to look at things differently, here's a way we have to start. With this concept, we'll look at science. With this concept, we'll look at religion. We'll look at the self. We'll look at reality. We'll look at synchronicity. We'll look at morality, all that kind of stuff.
That you just read comes up the image on the front for me. It's just beautifully. I don't know why.
So I'm just trying to get a sense of what we can get through. Probably we'll go about this pace. So we might speed up a little bit. But say shoot for 10 to 15 pages a meeting. We'll have to kind of evaluate how we work together. If you feel it's going too slow or too fast, haul it. So I don't think we'll get through the end of Chapter 1 by next week. So I don't think you need to read anything extra. It will certainly take us next week to finish the chapter. Is that what you were thinking of? A little more theory than other stuff we've done, but to me it's a fascinating notion that they've introduced what is projection and how much of our world is based on projection. And we'll tie it to science, religion, and so on as well.
It's a lot easier to do it with other people. I mean, I have the book and I read maybe 2 chapters, and it's like I was fun.
Yeah, she assumes a lot. Okay, well, see you in 2.